It's our bullpen update episode. We'll update everyone on bullpen situations around Major League Baseball, go over strategy, and give you fantasy advice along the way. Reliever Recon's Greg Jewett joins us next here on Beat the Shift. And welcome to another episode of the Beat the Shift podcast. I am your host, Ariel Cohen, and with me as always is Ruven Guy. How are you, Ruven?
I'm doing great. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, managing through the smoke here. Oh my goodness, Canada. It's Rob Silver is sending some smoke our way. Well, what's up with that?
Yeah, I don't know. Like they had to cancel a couple games. They canceled a game in Washington today for it, which is crazy because Washington is a good, couple hundred miles away from here in New York.
Yeah, it's crazy. My softball games last night were canceled as well. We had an important doubleheader, but we'll have to do that next week. Unbelievable. And, yeah, it's affecting baseball. It's affecting our lives. And what can you do? But we go on here, and we've got a great show for you tonight. We're bringing back the bullpen guru. We've had him on our show earlier this year. Welcome back from Reliever Recon, Greg Jewett. How are you, Greg?
I'm well. Great to be on with you guys.
Well, Greg, last time I congratulated you on taking me down in Tout Wars in the wild card round. And now you haven't lost a game this year. You're 9-0. What can you please make it easier on everybody, please? I mean, I'm in second place, but 9-0. That's crazy, man. Good for you.
I appreciate that. It's a little bit of luck and a little bit of decent pickups. So hopefully we can keep the momentum rolling. You know, I my goal every year is just to make the playoffs. So this is a nice way to lay that foundation.
I mean, the only way to beat you is to pretty much come to your house, get inside your computer, change a couple of players, and drop a couple of guys. I mean, it's just crazy, man.
Well, you picked up one of the guys I dropped on accident last week, so we'll not on accident, but
accident.
I was trying to decide between the person you picked up and Brett Beatty, and I made the wrong decision.
Who did I pick up?
Naylor.
Oh, sorry, man.
It's okay.
Better luck next time. All right. Anyways, but that's a little bit about Tout Wars, but you've come for relievers here, and we're going to talk through relievers, some strategy, and an update for you because, as everyone knows, relievers are an important part of the game, especially if you do rotisserie. So this is for the roto guys here. And, well, first of all, strategy section tonight. We talked before the season on the right way to draft and what should you do and what the strategy is. Tell me, Greg, what do you think, knowing what we have the first 2 months of the season, what would have been the optimal strategy going into preseason drafts if you would have done the absolute right thing? And obviously, if you pick the right pitcher, you pick the right pitcher. I'm not talking about, you happen to stumble on the right guy. I'm talking about what is the general strategy walking in that would have been the successful one for this year?
We actually talked about it. We agreed that getting a reliever from the second or third tier was probably the way to go this year. And again, you did have to miss a couple of landmines there. However, I know I spoke about Felix Bautista. We talked about Camilo Doval, guys of that nature. The top three guys are stable, safe sources, but you can also get them. It's almost been a 3-year trend where the guys going after the top three have been the sort of the sweet spot when you're getting those saves in your drafts. So more around the 4th or 5th round as opposed to paying the full pony for a first or second round closer that, some of those prices have escalated to the last couple of years.
Ruven, you agree?
I do agree, but I mean, if you went top heavy with the relievers here, it wasn't such a bad thing. I mean, Clase is leading the league in saves. Romano is second in saves, and if you want to count Hader, he's not too far behind either. He's about 7th or 8th in saves. So you could have gone both ways. You could have gone top heavy, but middle seems to be the best way to go. The Felix Bautista of the world, the Doval, who's almost like on the second tier, Alexis Diaz second tier, Bednar second tier. Those guys, I think those are the targets that people should have aimed for because they were cheaper, and you could have put more money into hitting, which seems to be the way things are moving now.
Yeah. Greg, you talked to me the last time you were on the show. You talked me into picking David Bednar this year, and I picked him over you in Tout Wars, and ding ding, he's the third most valuable relief pitcher in Roto this year with a value of over $17 according to Razzball Player Rater. Unbelievable. Good call on that one.
Oh, I appreciate that. I had him last year in tout. I actually got him in a reserve last year in tout. And that worked out again this year, getting Seawald in the reserves. I mean, there's nothing sexy about Paul Seawald, but the early season injury to Andres Munoz just kind of paved the way for him to be valuable. So now that when I keep the points tab on the reliever recon closer charts, I believe Bautista's at the top of it with the CBS scoring that we play in, and Seawald, I believe, is top 5, which is kind of crazy that he was available in reserves.
So before, this is not the Injury Gurus trivia, but can you guys name the top 10 relievers according to Razzball Player Rater for this year?
Well, obviously Felix.
That's number 1, Ruven.
I'm going to say Bednar.
Bednar's 3.
Alexis Diaz.
That's number 2.
Jordan Romano.
Number 4. Doing good so far.
Doval.
5.
Clase.
7.
Devin Williams.
6. 3 more to go.
Is his top 10?
Top 10.
I'm gonna shoot a wild shot here. What about Yenier Cano?
Cano is 13, so he's close 13. To that, even though he's not exactly the closer.
Okay.
Carlos Estevez.
That's number 8.
Alex Lang, even though he blew a save today.
That's number 10. 1 more to go. You've mentioned him already, Greg.
Seawald
it is. So there you go. That's your top 10. Just falling outside in value is David Robertson, who's filling in really nicely for Edwin Diaz. You got Hader, and you got Will Smith and Clay Holmes as well. Kimbrel to follow suit. I mean, I'm looking at it. You're right. The optimal price point was right after the elites. I do agree with that. But other than Edwin Diaz, who obviously was unfortunate, there were very few, call it locks, that were in that has busted. Like Jose Leclerc busted, but he's lower end. Daniel Bard busted. He was drafted as a closer. Everyone else pretty much has shown somewhere near their drafted value. So I guess the market was more right than wrong. Did you guys agree?
Well, what about Josh Hader? I guess he's considered a bust compared to where he was drafted, right?
I mean, Hader returns $10 worth of value, so I wouldn't call it a bust. I would call it a hold, let's say.
It's strange this year. He's so reliant on his sinker. He's even stopped throwing his slider as much. It's really strange when you're looking at his game logs and the pitches used. He was always trying to sprinkle in a changeup to go with the slider and the sinker, and I believe, I didn't double check it before we came on, but he's been throwing his sinker, I believe, almost 85% of his pitches this year. It's like the only thing he trusts right now, and it's strange.
So down low, the uncertain teams, the White Sox, that's a bust. Oakland, of course, that was a bust. The Cubs situation, a bust. Diamondbacks, of course, a bust. The Dodgers situation primarily has been a bust. There really hasn't been anybody to move forward. I guess nobody was really paying prices, but it was a bust, and it was shown to be uncertain. Like, we didn't know who it was. The only low values that were really big wins were Estevez in Los Angeles, Detroit with Lang, and I guess you would consider Kimbrel a win, although Alvarado's coming back. We should probably talk about that as well later on. But before we do that, a little bit more strategy. Greg, if you were drafting today, so if you were doing like a second chance league, what would be the optimal closer strategy? Would you say that it continues, or would you tilt more towards winning teams, more towards because obviously if you're on a team that's poor, that's lousy, not making the playoffs, you might trade your closer. What would change, if any, in terms of strategy if you were drafting now for a second chance league?
Well, I mean, I went through some of the second chance ADP just because you would put it on the sheet. And it was interesting. It's strange because we were just talking about Hader. He was the first reliever taken in the second chance drafts according to the ADP on NFBC. Clase went second. Bautista moved up to third. He jumped ahead of Romano. And after that, it's kind of stable. Devin Williams is getting more love now. Camilo Doval. Rizal Iglesias was going at around pick 70 in those second chance drafts. The biggest riser to me was Alexis Diaz, and it happened last year with Baltimore because they never really used a closer, and then they kind of turned it over to Jorge Lopez, and then when they traded him, they gave it to Bautista, and it signaled a change, and the fantasy community adapted and went with it. And the same thing has happened this year with Cincinnati. Even in the preseason, Bell intimated that he would use Diaz sometimes in the eighth inning if he had to win a game, but he's really just turned him loose and used him as a closer, and it's been refreshing, and he's made the most of it. He gets that long extension, he's on top of you, and it's been great to see and to have him carry that over. So to me, those are the biggest shocks, and Yohan Duran, I think we always want more out of him, but Baldelli uses him a lot for multiple inning outings, so then he's not available the next day. It's been strange usage patterns with him, even though the kid's really talented. It's unfortunate. And then in the later areas, even as well as Estevez has pitched, he's still not getting appreciated by the fantasy community. He's going after pick 100 in those. And Jason Adam traded spots with Fairbanks. AJ Puck was going at pick 240, which I found strange. I mean, I know he missed time with the nerve irritation, but he came back and recorded all 3 outs via strikeout in his first outing back from the injured list. So, and Alvarado, who you intimated at, there's guys in the second half that could do well. That kind of flew below the radar on this. So I think you could have done what we talked about earlier in the year. Pick your anchor at the beginning if you get one of the guys we mentioned already, and then you sprinkle in with a couple of these guys later on to spackle in those saves. And being on good teams absolutely matters.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, I think that pretty much what you see is what you get with the closers, and the price point are, you don't need that elite price point. You can make it with the second tier, still a number one closer, but that's probably a little bit better price. They're still very certain. And of course, there's more certainty now than preseason. You can see, and by the way, you were right. Alexis Diaz, that has really turned into a premium guy almost. I mean, before the season, his price was low, and it was that because of the uncertainty. Is it him? Is he going to use high leverage? But because he's doing that, and now the Reds brought up Ellie De La Cruz. They're going for it. You're not going to have him traded. Like, there was speculation, will he be traded? No, this guy is the closer. So he, to me, of anybody, changed the value the most from preseason to now. Bautista, to me, was always high valued, but Diaz changed the most value, I think.
Yeah, and not only that, with Diaz, a lot of the uncertainty in the preseason was the fact that Edwin Diaz went down, so the Mets are going to trade for him. When are they going to trade for him and everything like that? The Reds are only 4 games out of the wild card right now, and they are going for it. And the fact that he's been so successful, and the fact that he's being used predominantly in the 9th inning, just like Greg, you said, he's not being used that much in the 8th inning. So he is being used as a quote-unquote traditional closer, and that's what you're looking for. As opposed to, let's say, if you drafted Ryan Helsley, or if you drafted Giovanni Gallegos, both of those guys, they have the same amount of saves right now, and yet you throw coming into the season that Gallegos was going to get almost no saves or minimal saves, and Helsley will get the majority of the saves. It's just the way the things panned out.
Greg, do you think it's worth to have on your roster middle relievers, instead of picking up a spot starter that could stink up your ratios, just pick up, the next most promising reliever, the Nick Anderson type from Atlanta. Obviously, those guys who got in Cano did really, really well. If you picked up Giovanni Gallegos because he was dropped, that was a good thing. Like, do you think this is a worthwhile strategy to really not speculate, but really look at the market for relief pitchers just for their ratios, right? And hey, you never know, they could turn in. They're probably next in line for closer anyways.
I think it's easier in a 15-team league. It's tougher in a 12 just because of the numbers that you need to accrue. It's been very strange this year because one of the guys on Recon, who goes by Bullpen Guru on the Twitter machine, he did a whole thing about what he called the fruit with the first reliever out of the bullpen, and how those guys were racking up a bunch of wins last season and the year before, and this year it hasn't been as stable. It's been more of It's the eighth inning relievers like Nick Anderson used reference. He's got 4 wins already. Scott Alexander picked up his 5th win today. It's a lot of these 1 inning guys that are actually picking up the cheap wins. So it makes it a little more difficult because you need them to work at least 2 to 3 times in a week to get something out of them. So to me, it's been a little dicier using the middle relievers this year because there's been a lot of blowups. However, you can do it, but you really have to pay attention to what reliever you're using and who his matchups are on the week going forward. And like Yennier Cano had a hot start. He struggled a little bit lately, but if he's getting 4 outs in 2 games, then that does help you, especially if he's getting like 5 strikeouts in those 2 outings. That could be equal to, Aaron Savali today, I think, had 5 strikeouts in 5.2 innings. So if you're getting that kind of production, yes, but you really have to monitor who you're matching up those pitchers with.
Yeah, good point on the depth of the league as well. Ruben, I'll go to you for this one first. How do you think the new rules with the pitch clock and throwing over, how do you think it's affected relief pitchers?
I actually don't think it's affected them that much. I mean, the one reliever we thought that would really affect was Kenley Jansen. And Kenley Jansen seems, I mean, he had the one weird game where he had like 3 or 4 pitch violations. But I think all the pitchers, after it's 2 months already, most pitchers have already adapted to it. They know what they have to do. They're on the clock, and I think they've actually adapted pretty well. Do I think it's affecting their numbers? I don't think so. I mean, Greg can answer this better, but I don't think that strikeouts are down for relievers. I don't think walks are up for relievers, and I think the amount of clock violations have gone down steadily as the season has gone on.
Do you think that it affects starters more? There was this guy on Twitter, I can't remember his name, but he had a whole thread about how the clock really affected Alek Manoah, because Manoah was more of a max effort guy for himself, and he just wasn't resetting properly now, where he used to take a lot of time between pitches to reset his max effort. He can't do that now, so he's gone much wilder, and pitches were less effective. Do you think that's true, Greg, that starters might be more affected than relievers? And what's your take on it affecting relievers?
I think so. Like older relievers like Bard and Kenley they've both had interviews saying where it feels like an aerobic workout now when they come in. So they're talking about 1 inning outings. So if you're talking about veteran pitchers dealing with the new pitch clock, it really has to be causing some fatigue. And I know people are frustrated with Verlander and some results from Scherzer and other guys, but it's as I can attest to this. I'm 53. As I get older, I just don't I don't bounce back like I used to, and everything being sped up, I think it does cause some of these problems that we see with command or leaving pitches over the plate and things of that nature. You're just not as sharp or as crisp. So that threat about Manoah, it can make a lot of sense, and we anticipated that. As far as relievers, as Ruben was saying, it hasn't been a big difference. I went through the league stats from 2022 compared to this year. Strikeout percentage is actually up by 0.3% from 23.6 to 23.9. Walk rates have grown a little bit, 9.1 in 2022 to 9.7% this year. The biggest difference I see is a little bit in the whip. It was 1.28 last year, and right now it's 1.32. And we know usually relievers tire in the second half, so that might get closer to a league average whip being around 134, 135 at the end of the season. I think that's where it is. So there's more hits, I think, happening, especially with the shift not being there. The BABIP is going up slightly, and I think that's where you're seeing the ratios growing a little bit is as a result of the shift, along with the pitch clock working against pitchers as a whole.
So I want to talk about a couple of closer situations and really target this towards helping your fantasy team because there's going to be the trade deadline. There's going to be, maybe there's guys on the waiver wire. Maybe there's guys back or were injured. So we'll talk a little bit about all of that. So first to you, Greg, and this always comes up because the trade deadline's coming up. There's going to be closers that are traded. There's going to be closers that are traded to another team and lose their role because they're just going to be a guy on another team. Or maybe there's a really, really elite guy that they're going to be traded, but they're going to keep their role because they're just so good. So, can you identify for us a couple of potential relievers that are going to be likely to be changing teams and what their status will be on their new team?
It's really odd this year because there's not a lot of upper end closers that are on expiring contracts or some of the situations that you're talking about. So I can't say today who's going to be selling. There's almost an article every day about Aroldis Chapman's going to get traded sooner rather than later. So he would have to go to the right situation to get save chances. Um, there was an article today on The Athletic about Liam Hendriks possibly being traded during the season, which would be, I think, a horrible PR look for the White Sox. But if it's what's best for him and his family, then I'm okay with it. You would think he would go somewhere to be the guy if he's going to get moved. But outside of that, I haven't heard much. Now, I think Will Smith could get affected if Texas goes out and decides that they're going to get somebody to either be a right-handed complement to him or to take over, the ninth inning so he can work in a setup role and really match up with left-handed hitters. Because Texas, even losing DeGrom, we know that they're going to be going for it. And what's going to happen with, the Cubs are going to trade relievers. They do it every year. And how all these other things shake out, what's going to happen with the Dodgers. There's a lot of moving pieces there with guys coming back. So I'd love to be able to give you a better, more in-depth answer, but I don't anticipate close. You know what I mean? The closers with the quotation marks around them. A lot of them changing teams this year. I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, that's a good point, and it has a lot to do with the fact that with more wild card teams, there's more teams that are in it, more teams going for it, and then you have the batch of the other teams that aren't that might lock up guys. Alex Lang, is there a reason for the Detroit to trade him? Right?
I don't think so. Just like I don't, I think it would be terrible PR for the Pirates to trade Bednar. I mean, he's under team control until 2027.
What about Carlos Estevez? I mean, the Angels.
Well, he just signed a 3-year deal. I don't see the reason why they would trade him. I mean,
But didn't Iglesias sign a big deal and then they traded him as well?
he did. That was a 4-year deal, but yeah, they wanted to shed the money. It's possible. I mean, I don't know what the Angels' MO is. No one ever does. They're a tough organization to read. I mean, I guess they could sell high on him if they chose to do it. I just don't think Ben Joyce has the command right now to come in there and be a save factor.
Ruvain, anybody else, Ted?
Yes, there are a couple guys I can think of. You mentioned Liam Hendriks not being traded, but I can see Kendall Graven being traded. He would close before. He has closing ability. He's closed this year a little bit, and he's not going to be that expensive. So he may be a guy that a lot of teams are looking for, especially if the White Sox remain out of it. On the Nationals, Kyle Finnegan. The Nationals aren't going anywhere right now. If they can get more pieces to their puzzle for the next coming years by trading a Kyle Finnegan or even a Hunter Harvey, who's shown that he's been able to, to get back on the horse a little bit, I think those two are names you can think about. And a guy that I'm going to put out there, and I mentioned him already, and there's a possibility if the Cardinals stay out of it. I know Ryan Helsley is still under control for another 2 or 3 years. They can get a lot for him. They can get a lot for Giovanni Gallegos also. I think if the Cardinals stay out of it, I think one of those guys may be traded.
Are there any injured players that are coming back soon that we should keep our eye on? And of course, how does that affect the other bullpen? The two people that comes to mind right away is Daniel Hudson, who's working out now for the Dodgers. I can see him taking over as the closer, and I'll also say Jose Alvarado's coming back. Maybe he takes over for Craig Kimbrell. What are your thoughts on those situations? And are there any others we should be aware of?
Yeah, there's a couple. Hudson had the knee issues, but he's been responding well since then. The team still estimates it might not be till late June, early July that he returns, but that bullpen's been struggling the last few days. That was highlighted in my article on The Athletic today and on a previous post on Reliever Recon the day before that. Evan Phillips, even this year, has kind of regressed to the mean a little. I mean, he's been very good, but not nearly as good as last year. So they need somebody to kind of stabilize that ninth inning, and Hudson has the experience to possibly do that. You already said Jose Alvarado will be activated on Friday. He's going to be dressed and ready to go. We're just praying he stays healthy. Puck just returned for Miami, and I know you want to talk about that later. And we've got Pete Fairbanks through yesterday, and they were going to determine if he needed to work in a minor league game, but he could be activated as soon as Monday, which puts him back into safe situations with Jason Adam with the Rays. Their bullpen needs the extra arm and the help in the late innings. So those are guys we're kind of tracking now, and I don't know, and Ruvain can probably talk about this better than I. I just don't trust Alex Reyes being ready to go in the second half. He could, and he can make a liar of me. And I know the Dodgers, they're a savvy organization, but they're not afraid to sign somebody. And if it doesn't work out, they're not worried about it. Ruvain, do you think Reyes can return in the second half?
It's possible, but I don't know how much you can expect from him. And plus, it's a track record. If you don't have a track record of staying healthy, why would you? Why? I mean, I can see that just taking a waiver on him, that's fine. But playing for fantasy purposes, there's no reason to take a waiver on him unless you're in like a really really deep league and you have him, and that's fine. But otherwise, there's really no reason. I mean, you can have him on your radar, listen about it, hear about it, but he's not a guy you're going to jump on.
Oh, and the one other guy I forgot to mention was Cody Hewer of the Cubs. He might be back within a week or two. He's in his 30-day rehab window. He was hitting 97 miles per hour the night before last. And we all know the Cubs bullpen is a mess to try and figure out. But at least Hewer, if he does get in there, he might be like the right-handed matchup guy. And that frees up Alzolay to go back to multiple inning outings, which gives that bullpen a little more depth before they start trading pieces away.
Good stuff. And before we go into a couple of specific closer situations for split teams, it's time for the Injury Gurus Trivia of the Week.
Okay, so one of the teams we're going to be talking about is going to be Tampa Bay, and it happens to be one of the answers to the question. But the question is this: which teams have used the most relievers and have gotten saves this year? There are two teams that are tied for the most relievers for total saves for the year, meaning the total amount of relievers getting saves. So I'm going to give you an example. Tampa Bay, they have 7 different players so far who have gotten saves this year. There is another team that has the exact same amount of players who have gotten saves. Who is it? Which team?
Yankees.
That's correct. Unbelievably, the Yankees have 7. Now, bonus one, there are a total of 4 teams that have only had 2 players record saves for the entire year. What are the teams?
I know Texas is one.
Texas is one.
Detroit?
Nope.
It's not the Mets because Drew Smith had one.
I'll give you a hint. It's a team, 2 players that I mentioned twice already in this podcast.
Oh, is it Duran and Lopez
No.
of the Twins? No.
No. The Cardinals.
Yeah, Cardinals.
Helsley and Gallegos have the same amount of saves. That's the only 2 players who have saves. Also, they're 2.
Toronto?
Not Toronto. The Colorado Rockies only have 2 players who've gotten
Baltimore.
saves. And Baltimore, correct.
Baltimore.
So all those, it's usually by this time you have more players getting saves, but I think when you see that, you kind of get an idea of the philosophy of the team, that they want to have only certain players close games or and try to keep it that way and don't swerve from it. So I'm going to bring up the Tampa Bay situation right now. Pete Fairbanks, Jason Adam. Who's it going to be the rest of the way? Is it going to be a split? Is it going to be the same Tampa Bay thing where we don't know who's going to get the save? And Jalen Beeks will end up with 10 saves this year. What's happening in Tampa?
When Fairbanks is healthy and available, they prefer him in the 9th inning because he can only do 1-inning outings. Whereas Jason Adam, I refer to as the highest leverage reliever. He can come in the 7th. They need him to get a bases loaded situation out of it and work the 8th inning too. And then he will still get some saves. So I think they'll go back to the way they used those 2 in the second half, where Fairbanks got last year this year, when Fairbanks has been active, he's finished the game 84% of the time. So he's got 11 games finished out of 13 appearances. So, I mean, they kind of showed you in the second half last year. And in the second half last year, I think Fairbanks had 8 saves and Adam had 4. I think you would see that similar ratio moving forward with the Rays.
Yeah, I agree. And Fairbanks, they gave a contract to, so they
Hmm.
don't have to worry about accumulating saves or better arbitration, that kind of thing. It's just Fairbanks, and Adam is obviously the clear number two. The Rays are still totally capable and totally ready to have anybody else if they like the matchups or if there's higher leverage elsewhere. That's true. So you'll get a lot of guys in the team who are going to get 1-2 saves here and there. But I agree. I think it's going to be Fairbanks and Adam having sort of a 2-1 split in saves.
But the whole thing with Fairbanks is that he has an injury history, so that's something you have to
Hmm.
watch for. If you have him on your team and he's coming back and you show that he pitches well a couple of outings, even a week or 2 3 weeks, he's a guy you may want to think of trading because he has that injury risk. And then try to invest in Jason Adam if you do that because you can get those saves. But he's a guy that yes, he will get the save opportunities, but he's always the injury risk. He's always a ticking time bomb just because he's great when he's healthy. He's just got to stay healthy.
Hmm.
So let's talk about the Rockies for a second. Pierce Johnson apparently has the hold on it. The only other guy to get saves is Justin Lawrence. I just looked that up. I'm surprised Bard hasn't gotten any. Obviously, he hasn't pitched much. He's pitched in 16 games. But Pierce Johnson's ERA is 6.56.
Yikes.
That is supported by 5.26 FIP. He's not been great at all. I mean, he's had a very high BABIP, but of course he plays in Colorado. I mean, I guess he's the guy. He's not worth owning in a 12-team league. He's
No.
worth owning, obviously, in a mono league. But is he worth it in a 15-team league? I mean, those ratios are god-awful. The Rockies aren't fantastic, so there's a limit to the number of saves. But I guess if you're absolutely hungry for saves, I guess he's the guy. Is that how to treat it?
I don't know. He had another meltdown today, so they it was strange. They used Justin Lawrence last week for two save situations. Now the one was a scoring thing. It was a 7-2 game, and the scorer gave him a save. It was kind of ridiculous, but he got the save right after that. It was a 1 point. He recorded 4 outs. So, but the other day there was a bases loaded situation in the seventh inning. They were only up by one, so they brought him in at like an HLR, and he did well. He stranded the bases loaded. Then they put him out there for the eighth inning, and he got fatigued, and they got a couple of cheap hits, and then all of a sudden they scored 2 runs, and he gets a loss hung on him. I think Lawrence right now is the best reliever in that bullpen, so I'm hoping like Yohan Duran that the team will give him more save chances moving forward and use him less in multiple inning outings if that's the case. The problem is there's just not a lot of depth in that bullpen. So if you're the best guy, there's times he's just going to go in there when they need him.
Yeah, Justin Lawrence highest bullpen whip at almost 1 win. Actually, sorry, highest bullpen WAR that is at almost 1 WAR.
Yeah.
Is it? I have a question though. Is there a chance that Brent Suter can steal some saves there because he's been pitching pretty well? Also, he's pitching in a lot of high leverage situations.
Yeah, well, he was the one who loaded the bases and got taken out with no outs of that game where he came in. I mean, there's a chance that Suter could, but I don't know.
Well, hold on a second. I'm getting a phone call right
They're the
now.
Rockies.
Oh, it's the Colorado Rockies. They need somebody in the bullpen apparently.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, it's pretty bad there. Ruvain, you have been a big Giovanni Gallegos guy for a while. I know you're always recommending him, even picking him up in a draft in middle of the season. We picked him up in labor, and he provides some saves here and there. What is the story with St. Louis, Helsley, and Gallegos? Both look decent this year. It looks like it's not extreme, Helsley only getting saves. It's going to be a little bit of both. What can we see going forward from the pair of Helsley and Giovanni Gallegos?
Well, the way it's been going is I think Gallegos is getting more of the opportunities, even though it's almost split down the middle with the total saves right now. I've always been a Gallegos guy. Gallegos seems to be the guy I would say, but Helsley still has that great strikeout ratio. I mean, the great K per nine, and you can't. It's so hard to go away from him. But he's just struggled, in the early part. And when he struggles, they put Gallegos in. I think they're going to do the two-headed monster just like the Tampa was doing with Pete Fairbanks and Jason Adam for a while. That I think it's going to be 50-50 for a bit. And I think that Gallegos will probably end up with more, but I wouldn't be surprised if each player ends up with about 14, 15 saves.
Do you agree, Greg? And what league depths should both be owned? Is it almost universal, you think?
I think they can both be owned in 12s. It's more ideal in a 15 if you have a safe share. It just, it really depends on what your roster needs are. I don't know about a 10-team league, but just because of the volume. But uh, I think we all agree at some point St. Louis is going to go on a little bit of a run here, or they should. And then that's going to, whichever one of them is getting the majority of those saves will get a little bit of boost in value. I kind of lean healthily, but we'll see what happens.
In a 10-team league, should you not own either of those two?
I'm not saying you shouldn't own them. I'm saying team context. Now, some of those 10-team leagues, you can do daily moves, so it makes it easier. I'm just saying if it's, depending on where you are in the standings and what you need, you may not get the save volume from them that you do from another guy that's got it by himself. That's the hard part. The shallower it goes, the more stable you want that save share to be.
All right, let's do another situation. Greg, Minnesota. You got Yohan Duran and Jorge Lopez. Duran has been absolutely the better pitcher. He's worth a lot more on the Roto Value Rater to date. How do you see it going forward? Is it pretty much more of the same? And I'm assuming you agree that Duran is the guy to own over Lopez. I would say Duran should probably be universally owned, and maybe Lopez, if you need something of a save share in a mono league, maybe a 15-team league. How do you see the fantasy use of those players?
Yeah, they've been using Brock Stewart more than Lopez in setup games. So I think if you look over the last 30 days game logs, you're going to see that Stewart has more holds and better ratios. So I would actually slot him ahead. And now they got Thielbar back, Giovanni Moran. I mean, to me, the only one in this bullpen worth owning is Duran. I wouldn't really go deeper than that.
All right, Ruvain, going to you on Seattle. Andres Munoz, he's back. I know I drafted him in quite a few leagues, got him on the cheap, and he's got a lot of upside. Is he going to take some saves away from SeaWorld? Maybe not at first, at least, because he'll be right back. But how do you see playing out? Munoz, to me, could be the better pitcher. SeaWorld has been fantastic, though.
I think they're going to keep Seawold as right now as a traditional closer until Munoz gets some more games under his belt. I mean, when he came back, he looked really good. I mean, really, his stuff was electric. He's throwing 100 miles an hour. He made Tatis look very funny when he was batting. He looked ridiculous. The only thing is that they'll probably use him in the higher leverage situations in the eighth inning and or ninth inning, depending where it goes, just because he throws harder than Seawold does. Seawold is a traditional closer. I think it's going to stay that way. I think Munoz will sneak some saves to begin with. I think maybe toward the end of the season, if they're in a tight race, I think they may just switch back and forth. But for the most part, I think Seawold will get the majority of the saves.
You agree?
I do, and when you look at the second half last year in the playoffs, they used Munoz against the toughest pocket of the opposing lineups in whatever inning it was there. So if, Bo Bichette and Vlad Jr. are going to bat in the eighth, then it's going to be Munoz. But if they're going to be in the ninth, they might slot Seawald in the eighth and leave Munoz to match up with them in the ninth. Ruvain referenced it perfectly with the HLR thing. As this goes forward, Munoz will be the HLR, which just means, just like we talked about with Tampa Bay, you're probably looking at a 2-to-1 ratio on saves between the two of them moving forward this season.
Okay. Let's talk finally about the Miami situation. And I think it's actually a rather important one because Miami pitching is actually decent and games are tight. There are more save ops for the Marlins than you would considering their record, and the record is not bad at all. It looks like AJ Puck is the guy, as you mentioned earlier. He was injured. How do you see it going forward? We're talking pretty much like an 80-20 share for Puck, and who's the next guy? I'm assuming it's Floro?
Yeah, Floro will, once in a while, I think Floro will get, like, if there's a real tough pocket of right-handed hitters in ninth inning, they might save them. They were going to do that once earlier in the season. And they used Puck in the eighth and Floro in the ninth. But yeah, Puck's been very good. And, he's got 6 saves and 16 appearances this year. He's got 12 games finished, which means he was the last pitcher going. That's 75% of his outings. And he has a 27.5 K minus BB. I mean, it's I don't think it's ever been a question of stuff with Puck. It's always been, can he stay healthy? So it's like a rodeo. We're gonna stay on the We're going to stay on the Buck and Bronco as long as we can. If he gets hurt again and knocks us off, we dust ourselves off and move on to another reliever.
So before we do waiver wire, or I should say to start the waiver wire section here, Ellie De La Cruz. We mentioned him a little bit earlier. He is phenomenal. Ruve mentioned that it's 10 seconds from home to third. He had a really good-looking triple. He had crushed a homer already. They're batting him fourth coming up. Now, in a lot of leagues, if you play in a competitive league that allows minors players, he's probably already picked up. Obviously, if he's not, he's the number one pick for the week, I think. And the NFBC, and we have a lot of listeners from that, there are the minor leaguers who haven't played at all do not appear in the player pool until they play a game. So when the waiver wire hits this weekend, it would be a free-for-all for him. The question for the group here is he going to be pretty much the number one pickup for the year? How much should you spend for him? How much do you think he will spend? The timing, of course, this is early June. People have depleted, 30, 40% at least of their fab. What do you think, Greg? What are people going to pay? What should you pay? And is this going to be the number one guy of the year?
I think the high-end NFBC, depending on what people have left, I think they're going to spend 80 to 85% of their remaining fab on him.
Agree, Ruvain?
I tend to agree. I don't think it's the smartest thing to do. And it just so happens that the NFBC league that we're in, he was drafted preseason by someone in our league, so we don't even have an option for that at this point. I actually looked it up because I'm going to be curious to see how much he goes for. But this is similar to like the Chris Bryant coming up before he was available. This is similar to a Trey Turner if you didn't have him before the season started coming up. This is a guy who can change your team dynamic just because he runs, he steals bases. He's going to hit a lot of home runs. He's batting fourth in the lineup being called up. He is possibly the guy to turn the Reds around into a possible playoff contender, which is why Alexis Diaz is probably not going to be traded. So he is going to be a guy that's going to go for anywhere between 60 and 80% of everyone's remaining fab, which is, I think, is going to be crazy.
Yeah. I mean, the projections for Ellie De La Cruz rest of season, according to ATC, 10 homers, 16 stolen bases, 245 average. We're talking 40 runs, 42 RBIs. Just to give you a comparison, let's take Ronald Acuna, the number one player in fantasy right now, rest of season. Well, the average is much better. De La Cruz is going to strike out some, but 21 homers, 25 stolen bases. That's a huge fraction of that total. I mean, is this rest of season? We're talking third rounder? Is that a fair comp?
It's possible.
Yeah, I mean, he's got to be worth that in fab. Obviously, injury can happen to anybody, but if we're talking those kind of projections, and usually, I don't like bidding on these prospects, rookies, because the projections don't show anything. They're hot or they're the projections usually low. Projections are so high on this guy, and I don't see anything that's completely wacko on it. I mean, the average is still fairly low, which it makes sense, but the power's there, speed, young guy. I think the recommendation of spending at least half of what you have left, 60%, is at a minimum. Why wouldn't you? I mean, obviously, it depends on your situation. If you looks like you're going to need more fab week to week because you've got an injured team. If you're up, you want to pad, you want to be safe. You want to make sure you have fab to get week after week. But certainly, if you're in the bottom half of the league, you got to spend 80% of your fab on this guy, right? If he's going to be a third rounder, sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why I think the bidding is going to be closer to the 80, if not higher.
Yeah, crazy. All right, well, anyways, back to waiver wire. Other than De La Cruz, Greg, start with you. Who are a couple of waiver wire guys that you might want to pick up this week?
If we're talking hitters first, right?
Yeah, let's do hitters.
Okay. I just wasn't sure. So I also have to do a column for Baseball HQ, so we'll give it a little bit of it away here. But if you're looking for like a 12-team league streamer, I think Nick Prado, he's been hitting leadoff 5 of the last 6 starts. Next week, he's got 3 games against the Reds and 3 games against the Angels. Not exactly dominating pitching staffs. 5 of those pitchers are slated right now to be right-handed pitching. Over his last 44 plate appearances, he's got 2 home runs with a 316 average. What gets my attention is an 18.2 barrel percentage in those plate appearances and a 45.5 hard hit percentage. So I think you've got a guy with power that's starting to figure things out, hitting at the top of the lineup, which will kind of hamper his RBI. But if he's giving you home runs and runs hitting from the spot and getting more at bats, that's an ideal stream option for next week in that situation.
Yeah, safely hitting 8 out of the last 9 games. Ruvain, anybody else to pick up this week?
Yeah, I got 3 guys, actually. First guy I'm going to mention is Ramon Laureano. He's only 32% owned in CBS right now. In the last 2 weeks, he's batting .303, no homers, 3 stolen bases. But listen to this. He's only struck out 6 times in the last 2 weeks. That's very good. And he plays for Oakland, which means he will probably be traded to a better lineup and have a better opportunity somewhere. So now's the time to get him before he does get traded to a better team. So he's only 2% owned, and he's on a hot streak right now, so he's a guy to go after. Another guy, these 2 guys are for a little bit deeper leagues. I'm going to go with Tommy Pham. He's had a couple more RBIs today. I was watching the game, a couple more RBIs, which is great for the Mets, bad for the Braves. The last 2 weeks, he's been batting .375 with 3 homers, 9 RBIs, 2 stolen bases. He's going to get more playing time because Daniel Vogelbach just can't hit his way out of a paper bag. So it's very possible that he'll get DFA'd, that Daniel Vogelbach will be DFA'd, and that'll give more playing time for Tommy Pham. He's only owned in 3% of CBS leagues, so that's something to look at. And another guy, because of injury, because Aaron Judge is out, we don't know how long he's going to be out for, and that's Jake Bauers, the number 1 top prospect for the Rays. In the last 2 weeks, he's batting .318 with 3 homers and 7 RBIs. So he seemed to have found something there with the Yankees. He's going to get more playing time because Judge is out, and he's only owned in 2% of CBS leagues. So you want to pick up guys who are widely available everywhere, who have been hot and will get playing time. Those are 2 guys.
You mentioned Vogelbach. Why in the world did the Mets DFA Gary Sanchez instead of him? And I'm going to recommend Gary Sanchez if you are in a 2-catcher league. He's 20% owned on CBS. With the Padres, he's batting .310 with 4 homers and 9 RBIs in his first 9 games. He's getting reps playing DH. Why in the world did Vogelbach stay and Gary Sanchez out? Because the Mets absolutely had to have a lefty? I mean, the Mets got tons of lefties. I don't know. Bad move by the Mets, I think, and good for the Padres. Gary Sanchez, a couple of other guys. We mentioned Luke Rowley last week. He's still just 35% owned. Pick him up. 2 other guys. Jesus Sanchez, 20% owned, 6 homers, batting .306 in 38 games. He was a sleeper preseason, and in the last 2 seasons, he's hot now. Pick him up. And how about Joey Weimer? I believe I was there with, maybe the 3 of us were there. I was definitely there with you, Greg, I know, looking at him in a game, and that guy had the quote, the freak factor. He just had some kind of extra dimension, and we were all screaming, wow, this guy looks good. Out of nowhere, he made some great throw. He hit a homer. Well, in 60 games this year, he has 8 homers and 9 stolen bases. Not going to have a fantastic average, but if you're looking for some power speed production, he's on fire right now. He went 4 for 4 the other night with 11 total bases. Weimer, 25% owned. Check him out. Greg, anyone else to add?
I was gonna say Rayleigh, so nope, I'm good.
And you mentioned Joey Weimer. When we saw him in the Arizona Fall League, everyone was commenting on how his blonde hair was long and flowing as he was running around the bases, and he looked great. He's been doing great since he got a haircut, which is kind of funny.
The anti-Samson, right?
Yeah.
Is it Joey Weimer or Joey Weimer? Like a German name.
When I had the game on last night, they said Weimer.
It's Weimer.
Okay. I mispronounce names on the show a lot on purpose. Some of them, by the way, but I'm trying to get his right name and do you justice, big boy. All right, pitcher preview. Let's talk about some pitchers that you might want to pick up. I'd say short-term perspectives are not great. I'm scanning the waiver wire list and it doesn't look great for this week, but maybe you guys found some gems. So I'll let you start, Greg, first. Who's the pitcher you'd want to pick up this week?
We'll see how it works out, but I actually picked him up in tout when everybody was bidding on Abbott. I didn't have the resources to do that, so I added AJ Smith-Shawver from Atlanta. I was getting him just to be, I thought I was going to get a couple of relief outings this week, but now he's going to be starting the game on Friday against Washington, which puts him in line next week to either pitch at Detroit or get the Road Rockies at home in Atlanta. So for next week, I think that's not a bad spot to either be pitching in Detroit, who were shut out, or excuse me, they were no hit for, I think, 7+ innings today. Of course, Wheeler's a great pitcher, but still, he was great in the minors. I know he's only 20 years old, but we've seen the Atlanta farm system produce guys that are major league ready. I'll be obviously watching his start on Friday closely. But I think that's somebody, as you're saying, it's a very thin waiver wire for pitchers. So from a starting perspective, I think he's in a great spot no matter which matchup he gets, Detroit or Colorado next week. And another stream option, I didn't look up the numbers on CBS, but I will next time. I'm interested in Garrett Whitlock. Again, he gets Colorado in a road contest. Colorado's a different team when they leave Coors Field. So I think Smith-Shawver and Whitlock are both in good streaming options next week for 12-team leagues.
Greg, you've spent $916 out of 1,000 in Tout Wars. You've got $84 left. What?
Yeah, we can do zero bids, baby.
That's true, but
I got a lot of guys on the IL, so I mean, when they come back, I'll just be moving. Mid-season, my pickup's going to be Max Fried because he's going to hopefully return in the second half.
Are you serious? You get Max Fried also, and you're winning, man. But $84, oof! I like to save Fab in head to head here. I actually have the second.
You got the hammer for Ellie?
Oh, do I have the hammer for Ellie? I do have I'm like the third most, but I'm not gonna bid that much on him. But I could.
Don't give it away.
Live a little.
Well, it doesn't matter because I'm going to throw down at least $100 bid, and Greg can't beat it. So
no,
matter.
There's no chance. No, I'm not. Yeah. I can't bid on him. I know I'm not even going to put a thing on. It's not worth my time.
Yeah, don't bother because I'm going to at least bid $1 on Ellie De La Cruz. Wait a minute. No. I don't think he's available. You know who picked him up instead? Frank Stamfel picked him up this past week, even when he was not active. It's in Tout Wars, you can actually pick up players at any time, but the rule is you have to play him the first week. So he took that chance, he picked him up, and lucky for him. And by the way, I'm playing Frank this week, so he's screwing me 3 ways. But no, Ellie De La Cruz will not be up for bid because Frank has him. I forgot about that. Alrighty, Ruvain, anybody for you to add for a pitcher preview?
Yeah, I got two names here. First of all, I think Greg was looking at what I was looking up because I'm going to go with another Atlanta pitcher playing Colorado, and that's Jared Schuster. He's only 42% owned in CBS right now. He's playing Colorado in Atlanta. And last few starts for Schuster, he's 2-0 with a 3.18 ERA, and he's got 13 strikeouts in 17 innings. I like that matchup. Anyone against Colorado, away from Colorado, is good. And if you want to take a risk on a 2-star pitcher, you can go with Zach Greinke, who's owned in 19% of CBS leagues. He's possible to start against Cincinnati, at home in Kansas City, and at home against the Angels. Now, he probably may not get you you could hopefully get a win from the Cincinnati game, but remember, it's Kansas City. He's 0-1 in his last 3 starts with a 3.77 ERA. He's got some strikeouts. He's got 14 strikeouts in the last 14 innings, so he's hit a little doing well for his age. I hate to say that, doing well for his age, but he is. And he's 2 starts, so he will give you a possible chance of getting 2 wins. Not great. I mean, he's pitching possibly against Luke Weaver and Tyler Anderson, so those are 2 good matchups for the Royals. So it's a possibility that Zach Greinke can get you some wins.
So I'll throw 2 guys, but these are usually if I make a recommendation, all right, it's a recommendation. These guys are very low. I'd almost recommend picking up a good middle reliever or doing something else this week. But if you need a pitcher, Julio Teheran. He's only 20% owned. He's looked good so far. We mentioned him last week on the show. He's playing versus Pittsburgh this week and at Cleveland the following week. It's not bad matchups. And if he continues what he's doing, certainly that's a good bid. So he's interesting. And Yanni Chirinos will be back. He is scheduled for a 2-start week at Oakland, which is great, and at San Diego, which is not great. His ERA for the year 2.79. Now the thing is, he's not going to pitch that many innings. Right? We're talking 4 or 5 innings max. But are the Rays going to use an opener for him? If they do, he can pitch 2 innings and get a win. And the Rays are a good team, so he's interesting in that regard. I don't know exactly what the Rays are going to be using him as, but anybody out of Oakland is interesting to me. I mean, I have used to do the drop last year of who's playing the Pirates. Well, who's playing Oakland this year? I'll take that start. So Yanni Chirinos gets Oakland and another. If counting stats matter to you. Anybody else to add anything else?
I think that's it. I think there's one reliever, though, I want to mention that we didn't mention when we talk about the relievers in Florida, and that's Tanner Scott. Tanner Scott is one of the reasons why A.J. Puck is being used as a closer. Tanner Scott's had a very good season so far. He's a lefty, and so is A.J. Puck, which allows A.J. Puck to be, quote-unquote, not the only lefty in the bullpen and allows him to close. And Tanner Scott's been pretty good. He's pitching middle relief, so he's pitching maybe the 7th inning, he'll pitch the 8th inning, pitches 6th inning sometimes, and the Marlins have a winning record. So you're talking about guys who come in and possibly get a win late in games. He's a guy, if he's available in your league and you don't want one, can't stomach having a Julio Teheran on your league because it's not 2012 anymore, then, maybe that's the way to go.
Yeah, we picked him up in NFBC, you and I, last week.
Yes, we
in our
did.
Auction Championship League, and I like that pick. He definitely fills in a spot without having to put 7 starter. That's not great, and I don't like these matchups this week for waiver wire thin. So I'm good with just rolling with Tanner Scott for another week as an extra middle reliever. We got Batista in that league and Cano. I don't think it's a terrible idea to handcuff. What's your take on that, Greg? In terms of handcuffs. For maybe a shallow league, not, but when you're a 15-team league and saves are at a premium, we have Batista. I think that Cano is worth more to us than anybody else, so I'm glad we have him. What's your take on handcuff?
Yeah, roster construction and how you're doing things, but as we mentioned earlier, that those are the only 2 that have a save in that bullpen. So if anything were to happen to Bautista or he needs a day off, you still got his counterpoint to get the save in that game. So in that regard, it's okay. If you're looking for potential stashes, we spoke about Justin Lawrence already. I do think Scott McGough is kind of gaining momentum. If we remember last year when Robert Suarez came over from the MPB, it took him till about this time of year, and he did have a little injury issue, but as the season went on, he got his footing and emerged as a dominant reliever for the Padres, setting up for Hader going down the stretch there. I think McGough, I think he's been scoreless in 14 of his last 15, and he's gaining momentum. There was an ugly blown save by Miguel Castro against Atlanta, and if Castro has another tough outing or 2, he might get removed from the right-handed option in that shares save, and McGough might emerge. So that's somebody I would keep tabs on. There's a couple of others, but that's a good one for now.
Hey, I've got another strategy question for you, Greg, that we didn't talk about earlier. But I know you look at usage, very, very, very tightly. I mean, that's one of the things you monitor, and you have a great site, Reliever Recon, and you write about all the usages. How strict should everyone playing fantasy be looking in terms of setting lineups each week? Because I know for Tout Wars, I saw Emmanuel Clase had a very, very heavy end of the week last week with usage, and I've got a bunch of closers on my roster, so I didn't play Clase, even though obviously he's one of the better ones. But because of usage, I figured he's going to get only like one outing, maybe in 4 days. They'll stay away from him. How much should people really look at usage in the short term when setting their lineups, do you think?
If you have the flexibility, you need to pay attention to it, and that's why on the closer charts I try and highlight the guys in magenta. That means if you see that means they've appeared in 2 in a row or like 3 of the last 4. So I just call that monitor the workload. So you're thinking they might not get it. So like Lawrence had it today, and they obviously didn't use him in that game. So that's the whole point of doing that, and it is important because you as we spoke about with the pitch clock and fatigue and other things, you really got to start managing these guys. You can't run them into the ground. I mean, we're not even we just passed the 1/3 point. We can't burn out relievers if you have aspirations of playing in September and October.
All right, Ruvain, time for the injury report. What's going on for this week?
Well, we'll start with the biggest name out there, and that's Aaron Judge, literally and figuratively. Judge was placed on the IL with a sprained right big toe. That's what they're calling it. He stubbed his toe while making this crazy catch at Dodger Stadium. X-rays did not show a fracture. Yankees manager said that the Yankees won't have a timetable for his return until after the weekend. He got an injection for the toe. He seems pretty sore, quote unquote. Jake Bauers, I mentioned already, is going to get some playing time. Willie Calhoun will get some more playing time. Billy McKinney will get some playing time. But the issue with this is that they keep mentioning him, and they mentioned it today. I'm using the word weeks, that they don't know how long he's going to be out for, and I'm a little bit concerned. I don't think he's going to come back right away, right off the IL. I think it may take a week or two, even 3, sometimes 4. So I think they're erring on the side of caution. That's something to watch for. Byron Buxton, another guy who always seems to end up on the IL, was placed on the IL with a left rib contusion. He was hit by a pitch. Trevor Larnach was activated off the IL to take his spot, but I think Byron Buxton should be back pretty soon when he's available. Brandon Lau was placed on the IL with low back inflammation. We don't know how bad it is, but Tampa doesn't think it's too bad right now. Vidal Brujan was called up. Taylor Walls, Isaac Paredes will get this more playing time. Nestor Cortez from the Yankees was placed on the IL with left shoulder inflammations. He told reporters that he's going to be shut down for 15 days, and he also said that he had a problem recovering from the last few starts, and that he felt a twinge his last start. He already got an injection for his shoulder, and he's going to be reevaluated in about 10 days, so we'll see how that goes. Marco Gonzalez was placed on the IL with a left flexor strain based on MRI. He will be shut down for throwing also for about 10 days. We'll see how that goes. I don't want to end on a sad note, so I'm going to say Jacob deGrom now. He has a torn UCL, right elbow, Tommy John surgery done for the year. Second Tommy John of his career. We'll see how that works out. But I want to end on a high note. These players are the players who are going to be coming back in the next few days. Alec Boehm, Danny Jansen, Victor Robles, TJ Friedel, Alex Wood. All those guys should be coming back within the next week, so I can end on a high note.
That's my whole team in one of my leagues, by the way.
Actually, can I ask Ruvain a question? Because
Yes.
Yordan Alvarez left tonight's game with a sore oblique.
Yes.
So here's the quote from Dusty Baker after the game today. "We've just got to regroup and try figure out how we're going to win some ball games and get through this." That doesn't sound encouraging, does it?
No, that doesn't sound encouraging. If it's a mild oblique, it's usually about 2 to 4 weeks. It's a grade 1. If it's a grade 2, you're talking about 6 to 8 weeks, and grade 3 is even worse. It's a tear. So it's usually going to either be a grade 1 or grade 2. If it's a grade 2, he can be out for up to 2 months.
Oh boy.
Sorry.
Jose Abreu's got to step it up then, right?
Yeah, like he's been doing so far this year.
Well, that's why he said he got to step it up.
Exactly.
All right, good stuff. A lot of great stuff on the show, Greg. It's always fantastic having you. That's why we have you on, because you do a great job with the bullpen. And you mentioned Reliever Recon. It's a Patreon. You can definitely do it. I personally, just let you know, I don't buy a lot of Patreons. I just don't. That is one of the only ones. I think I have like one other Patreon I subscribe to, but this one is absolutely well worth it. Just to keep updated, because I don't have the time to watch every single thing, and the closer situation is something that you need to monitor. And reading the articles from the site really do a great job. So kudos to you. Anything else you want to advertise or push, Greg?
No, my column weekly for The Athletic publishes on Thursdays, which is obviously today as we're recording it. You can check those out. It's unfortunate that like everything I do is behind a paywall, but that's where we are in the fantasy baseball world now.
Definitely worth paying the money to, Greg. Fantastic, and also a great person, by the way, as well. You agree, Ruve?
I do agree. Yes, I do. He has great stuff.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Ruve, why don't you just plug what you got going?
Well, you can follow me on Twitter at MLB Injury Guru, or you can follow me for Twitter updates on the injuries, next guy up, who's going to be, how long they're going to be out, and everything like that. And I also have a weekly article on Rotoboard that comes out every weekend to help you navigate all the injuries that are going on in baseball and who's the next man up.
All right, I'm Ariel Cohen. You can see my work over at Fangraphs, over at Rotoballer, And on Twitter, I'm at ATCNY. And, of course, you can listen to us right here on the Beat the Shift podcast, presented by Fangraphs. I'm lucky I got my voice back a little bit, Ruvain. What do you think? It's been a couple of weeks since I got it. Not fully back, but enough to do my high-pitched voice a little bit.
Yep, I hear ya. Wink, wink.
All right, there you go. Feels good. All right, guys. Well, once again, thank you so much, Greg Jewett, for coming on the show. Hope everyone enjoyed the show and is doing well in your leagues. Hey, it's past June 5th. We mentioned that's the flag for when you got to look at the standings. Standings are real right now. So go address your teams, trading, waivers, strategy. Go to it and enjoy the season. All right, once again, thanks so much, Greg Jewett. From all of us here at Beat the Shift, we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Beat the Shift podcast presented by Fangraphs. Follow us on Twitter at beat_shift_pod.